So I'm coming to you now as the financial guru and saying the biggie topic to start off is cottages. People dream big. And when you're thinking of the chosen life, you think to yourself, I know I got it made when I got a cottage. When I got that second home and I can drive up north or drive west, there's a second residence, I'm on the water, and I got it made. This is gonna get me Instagram photos like crazy. I'm gonna look so good and people are gonna be so impressed with me. So this would be stupid not to do this. Yeah. So no matter where people are at, age-wise, career-wise, life-wise, kids, no kids, it's a no-brainer. Chosen life? Automatically the dream, just go get a cottage, right? So on topic number one, Zach, is it possible for everybody to have a cottage? You know, is that a good investment? And should everybody be striving now and paying whatever they got to do and get there right now?
Well, it depends what you're doing with the cottage, where you're looking, and obviously your personal situation, right? Like not everybody can afford a second property. And so I have clients, I deal a lot with real estate investors as well. So it's just funny that we all work in the same area. But I have clients, a lot of them have cottages or some type of waterfront property, right? And they each use it for different purposes, and depending on your income, right? Because it's all income based and what you can qualify for when you're, purchasing a property. Depending what you can do, you buy a different type of cottage, a different type of waterfront, whatever it is. But it is possible. A lot of people can do it. Are they good investments? I have one client who just bought, let's say a year and a half ago, a cottage in Muskoka. A beautiful, big cottage. It's like the one you see on the postcard, right? They have the Muskoka chair on the beautiful dock with the little fire pit there. Everybody's got their feet, up. And
that's the image.
That's exactly right? Yeah. And that's what they were going for. And so they go up every now and again. It's not like they use it regularly because they're professionals, very, very busy people too. And when they're not there, they Airbnb it. And they can charge, I think they're charging $1,000 a night in prime time.
This is in Canadian dollars, but if it was in the U.S., it could be equivalent easily in U.S. dollars as well.
Oh, of course.
Depending on where your location and etc.
Well, it could be even more, right? And so they're charging $1,000. I know for a fact that they're raking it in right now. The thing is with them, and it's the only, there's risks with any type of investment, especially with property, especially when you get a bunch of people up at the cottage, they get drunk and things like that. So there's always some types of minimal damage that can come across. But when you're making $1,000 a night, especially in the summertime, and then in the winter when it's winter break and everything, we're talking about crazy amounts of money here, more than enough to carry the cost of the mortgage. And then it's just like a free cottage for them. They go up there and they stay there whenever they want.
And that's a case where they're renting it out and they're working out a budget. I assume they're having a plan, a business plan where they're saying to themselves, okay, here's how much it's going to cost me to run it every single month, and here's how much it's coming in, and it's a no-brainer. I know I've had clients that purchase, for example, waterfront condominium units. So they're saying, I'm going to make my life easy here. So all I got to do is pay my condo fees. I got to pay property tax, pay the mortgage, and it's turnkey. Otherwise, my life is easy. I don't have to put any money in every single month otherwise. But it's amazing because the amount of money it costs to run something like that, and they're already carrying their first residence, which they presumably, if you're at the point where you're getting a nice waterfront condo, for example, you probably have a pretty decent sized house in a decent area, and you're probably paying for a decent sized mortgage. So now you're carrying two residences and you're paying down two mortgages with zero money coming in. And I think to myself, okay, well, what happens if life changes? What if all of a sudden your car goes? What happens if somebody gets sick? Blah, blah, blah. There's so many things that can come up in life variably. And then what are you going to do? You got to carry two homes. And then I tell the same people, I'm like, okay, imagine now this condominium unit was not a condominium unit. It's an actual house on the water. Do you know how many things could go wrong? Because a lot of them are older properties, not brand new cottages, right? So it could be built in the 1950s. We got retaining walls in the water. We have erosion. We have roofs caving in.
There's septic systems too.
Infestation, wildlife, who knows? All those things cost money and can cost a lot of money. Even if it was your primary residence, even if you only had one home and it was that cottage property, to run a cottage out on the water versus having a house in the city, would you say from a marketing, they make it seem like it's so fantastic, But in reality, from a financial point of view, it could be a money pit, right?
Oh, yeah, tons of times. For more often than not, it's a money pit. That's why when you do these types of things, you buy a second property, whether it's a cottage, on a waterfront, or it's a condo unit or waterfront property, you have to tick boxes, right? So whenever we do anything like this with a client, or at least when I do it, there's always a plan involved, right? We need to have these things. These are all priorities, right? You have an emergency fund, obviously, for when the car breaks down or whatever it is, right? We need to make sure that, especially the mortgage that we're taking on, if there was just a crazy rise in interest rates, which, we're going to see over the next little bit, can we still afford it? What's our job security like? Are we business owners? Are we kind of just, figuring it out month to month? Or do we know that there's going to be money coming in? Have we maximized all of our other types of investments and things like that? And, once we tick those boxes off, then we can make our way down to that goal and say, okay, so, we're in a position where we can take on these things. And, like everything you said, if all of these costs do come to fruition, are we still comfortable? Is the property making enough money at the point where for all of these things to happen, can we cover our expenses and still make sure that we're making enough money, right? So there's a huge plan involved, and most banks, any lender is going to want to know these things, right? You know that.
Right.
Whenever you come in, you want to purchase something, you want to ask for a huge amount of money, especially these days for a cottage. They want to make sure that their investment is sound too, because until you pay it off completely, they're invested too.
And that's one of the things we actually talked about when we were brainstorming on this topic, is that topic of mortgages. And people just take it for granted. I bought a cottage for $1.5 million. Yeah. And you know what? It's only going up because real estate can only go up. There's no way it's going to go down. I'm the smartest person in the world for buying this.
Yeah.
Of course, the bank's going to lend me money. But one of the first things the bank will ask you is, are you going to live there or are you going to rent it out?
Yeah.
And once it becomes a rental, Zach, does that change the mortgage game?
Oh, and how? It changes it so much.
So you had a real life example of somebody that was going through it. I've seen it as well.
Yeah.
And we won't get into too much. We're not mortgage brokers here, but as far as from a mortgage standpoint, if it becomes all of a sudden a commercial property, so all of a sudden it's bought for the purpose of business income, the interest rate's going to change.
Oh, that's for sure.
Because all of a sudden it becomes riskier because you could have a bunch of people in there, and the bank doesn't want to assume a property that just has people in there because it's not so easy to go to flip. You got to get people out, etc. with tenants. But other than that, there's a lot more paperwork, right, and a lot more risk. So it's just a more expensive process, and it's not so easy to get that mortgage as compared to when you're using it, right?
Yeah, and exactly, and it's the standpoint of they're looking at what is going to provide the capacity to lend, right? So for the average person, you go out and you look to buy a house, right? They look at your income, they look at what you're producing yourself in your job, right? But the second you look into a commercial property, it's now, okay, not just the fact that you can guarantee the mortgage yourself, right? But are you going to be making any money in this property? How are you going to make money? What are your expenses? And that's like what we said before. They have to see a plan, and they have to see, numbers to paper, real projections, realistic projections. That they can use to make sure that they have the lending capacity to give it to you, and you have the capacity to pay for it.
And then when you start getting into tenant issues, you could have, that means oh boy in Hebrew for those of you that don't know, or Yiddish actually. Yeah. But if we're going to start getting into the whole tenant issues, there's short-term tenants and there's long-term tenants. So Airbnb, everybody thinks, oh, Airbnb is so sexy. I want to own an Airbnb. I'm just going to make a bunch of money. They don't get that. There's a lot of planning that goes involved in that. Marketing. It's a business. One property as an Airbnb, right? You got to keep the thing clean. You got to keep it going. The flow of communication with your clients, the renters.
Yes.
And you've heard horror stories as far as Airbnbs of people partying and something happens to somebody. You have to think of all these type of things. I'm not trying to dissuade somebody from being a landlord. And by all means, if you do it right, Airbnb can be a fantastic money-making venture, but does the local area allow for it zoning-wise, or is it illegal to do an Airbnb? There's just so many considerations, so they have to have that plan, and they need to think, in my opinion, they got to think about these things and have a concrete plan before just buying it outright and saying, you know what, I'll get the mortgage after, I'm sure Airbnb it. I always stumble on that one.
It's a fast one.
It is a fast one. But then also, long-term tenants, and that's it's another part. And sometimes it's very good. You can have somebody who's very, very handy and they'll keep an eye. And so all of a sudden you got this nice waterfront property. Somebody's managing it for you. They're paying you the rent and they're paying your mortgage, and you're like laughing all the way to the bank. But on the other hand, I've heard of tenant issues where they're calling you every 5 minutes. Something's wrong. You're the landlord. Yes. You got to fix. So people who are not ready to be landlords, this may not be your way to go. I've had a lot of offers to come in and do webinars and seminars on landlord-tenant issues. I don't go to the tribunal. I don't deal with getting tenants out. It's a very niche item.
Yeah.
But I deal with residential leases all the time as a real estate lawyer. It's not so cut and dry. So you got to have a stomach and you got to have a big backbone to be able to go in, to be ready to be a landlord, in my opinion.
No, you're 100% right. So like I said, a lot of my clients are real estate investors, and when you talk to them, they're a specific type of person, right? They have to have that business owner mindset because you're on call 24/7 whenever they want, right? Not to mention because it is your property, right? There's a flood, sorry, but your tenant, especially in an Airbnb, they're not there tomorrow. They really don't care. Right. Yep. So you have to make sure that you're there on time all the time. And I have lots of clients who say, forget about it. I'll never Airbnb because there's no commitment. There's no motivation for a tenant then to make sure that the property is clean. It is nice. And you're not causing problems while you're there. Right. So there's, like you said, there's pros and cons for everything. But it all depends on the type of person that you are too.
I tell a person that no matter what professional they are, they could have a lot of degrees, which we'll talk about that later on in this episode. They can have a lot of experience in many arenas, but when they're thinking about a purchase of a particular something niche, like a cottage, I tell them, what would be a really good idea? Go talk to other cottage owners.
Yes.
Especially if you have a particular area in mind, go see people there. Ask friends, through friends, figure it out, because they'll tell you the real stories, You go into certain areas with certain types of lakes, and guess what? Erosion is a real thing, and floodings, and you have to know this kind of stuff and know if you're susceptible, because that affects insurance and that can affect resale. But all you're seeing is the beautiful chosen life, and you're like, that's for me. This thing's on beautiful water. Oh, I can't go into that water. It's too choppy. I can't do that. Oh boy, I don't get internet reception in this area. Oh no, I need my internet reception. I was going to move up here full time at some point. How am I going to run a business with no internet? There really are areas that have very slow internet still, and they're not upgraded yet. And that's a real thing. And they're saying, don't worry, we have the game plan by 2030, by 2040, it's happening. Well, we don't all have till 2030, 2040. Exactly. So I brought this topic up because I get asked a lot as a real estate lawyer and just as a person, I see that the market is so hot. There's no inventory out there. If I'm able to land one, I should totally jump in, right? And so I brought you on today to discuss that it may not be so simple. There are a lot of considerations that go into it beyond just sitting on the dock and living the chosen life, because it ain't that simple. The money's got to come from somewhere. I can't tell you in life, even on one residence, how people have no slush fund. People, if something happens to their home, they're going into lines of credits, or they're going to have to take out lines of credits. There's not a slush fund. I know you. I talk with you all the time as a financial advisor. You're a big proponent of having money ready for a rainy day.
Yes, you have to. There are so many things in life that can happen, whether it's your car, whether it's a flood, whether it's a move, a renovation here, anything, right? An appliance breaking. There's so many things. You could lose your job, especially we've seen over the last 2 years, right? You have to have money available, and you don't want to take yourself into debt just to have that money available.
So on the final note on the cottage, because we're already getting people shaking their boots, maybe rethinking this whole plan, even if you're able to afford to close it and you're able to afford to run the thing, you deal all the time with estate planning, because that's part of financial plans, life insurance and all this. Person's got that second residence as a cottage. They pass away.
Oh boy.
The kids are sitting there. Oh boy, it's cottage time. Yeah. It's not so simple, because there is our good friends, the government, and they have tax ramifications, correct?
So this is a good story. So I have a friend. I came into the business about 3 years ago, right? Okay. And there was an advisor that I was speaking to in the business much longer than me, right? He came into our office, which is just, it's right where Vaughan becomes Toronto. Yeah. And we were having a great conversation. And so I asked the guy, the guy's made a good business for himself. So I said, how did you do it, right? I'm a young guy. I want to learn. How did you do it? He goes, you'd be surprised. He goes, you know what I do? I walk down all of the main cottage roads and I go door knocking. And I say, and I do it on the weekend when everybody's up at the cottage in the summer. I say, hi, so-and-so. My name is so-and-so. Is this a cottage? Is this the second property for your family? Yes, it is. Okay, well, I am an estate planner. I'm a financial planner. Are you aware of the tax ramifications of holding this property and eventually passing it on to the next generation? And every person says, what the hell are you talking about?
Really?
They have no clue. They're just like, I just thought my mom or my dad or both of them would they leave it to me in their will and then it's mine, right? And he looks at them and he goes, well, when your mom or dad built this property, or your grandparents built this property for I don't know, 10 grand 50 years ago. Now you have a beautiful waterfront property in the middle of Simcoe or Muskoka or whatever it is. What did the one beside you just go for? Oh, right. That's it. John and Carol down the street, they just sold it for $2.5 million, right? Okay, so you're aware that you have, hundreds of thousands of dollars of tax liability when this thing comes to you, and you could just see their eyes just
The horror.
it's horrible. The pit in their stomach, and they're like, and they all look at you and they go, so how can we fix this? And that's always the question, right? Because you grew up at a cottage, your family at a cottage. When you're a cottage person, I grew up that way. You're a cottage person for life, right? That's just the way it is.
Absolutely.
And from that point moving forward, then there's planning that gets involved. And it's a good thing because there's a lot of smart tax planners, lawyers, people like me, financial advisors. We have lots of tools in our belt. So there are ways. It's never too late really. But it's definitely something you want to get ahead of.
So if we're going to sum up cottages at the end of the day, I think I have a mentor that I go to, especially when it comes to real estate. He's a pretty well-known real estate owner in the city. His nickname around town is the landlord. That's how well this person is known. Mm-hmm. And I asked the landlord, I said, at the end of the day, what do you think of cottage properties? I mean, you've been around cottages your whole life pretty much. And what's your take on it? He goes, at the end of the day, it's one thing if you're running it as a business, as a hotel, fine. If you're doing it for yourself, don't even think for a second, appreciation, whatever. It's a money pit. Yes. It's a labor of love. You're going to be renovating it nonstop. You're going to be pouring money in nonstop. This is for enjoyment. Don't think of it as an investment when it's for your own use at the end of the day. It doesn't work like that. So I think at the end of the day, if you can afford it, the luxury, like you want to go buy a Bugatti and you don't care that in 3 years the thing depreciated by 50%, by all means, knock yourself out. From a cottage end of it, you can be thinking, okay, yeah, in 10 years, this thing's going to double in price, but people forget that carrying cost, and the carrying cost includes the upkeep and the upkeep and the upkeep. So if it's a labor of love for you and you're okay with pouring out your money, by all means, knock yourself out, enjoy it.
Yes, exactly. And when you're investing in real estate, appreciation isn't the first thing. It's not the top of mind, right?
Yeah.
But, I don't want to deter too many people here from getting a cottage because
absolutely.
If you can't afford it, and there is a strong if there,
yes,
there is very few feelings where you're sitting on a dock looking out on the water and the sun setting and you put your feet up in the Muskoka chair and everything. That feeling it's unlike anything else. It's not even like, you go on vacation. It's not the same. Yep. So it's something to work towards. It's something that, a lot of people are working towards. My clients, we're all working towards these things. But like you said, yes, you have to be in a position to be able to afford it at least.
That sexy feeling of being able to roll down your yoga mat on the dock and being able to be out on the water,
yes,
to go in the canoe. You get to have, for people who do cottage and they go every weekend and, they're hardcore into it, 4-season, they are living a vacation every single weekend. Yeah. And they're re-energized. They're loving their life. It's inspiring them to do bigger things because they get that time away.
It's therapeutic.
Yeah. So by all means, find the balance. But at the end of the day, get the financial plan in order.
Yes.
Thank you for enjoying today's episode of the Chosen Life podcast. Go ahead and hit the subscription button below and the notification bell to catch all of our great shows. And remember to contact the Chosen Lawyers when you are ready for your next real estate and commercial transaction. Go to kormans.ca.